On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the next generation in the evolution of electronic warfare, a new strategy for computing at the tactical edge, and the Army's PEO-EIS pushes faster on digital modernization. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The Army says its transformation in contact model is changing the way it develops and fields electromagnetic warfare capabilities. The service says it's helping get out of the legacy requirements writing process and develop EW in a more iterative way. Colonel Leslie Gorman is Army Capability Manager for Electromagnetic Warfare Capabilities at the Development Integration Directorate for the Army. At TechNet Augusta, she tells me the Army's several years into the effort.
It is how we get after modernization of the Army out to 2 years. How do we get those forces out into the field within, 0 to next 2 years? How do we train? How do we fight? How do we operationalize our capabilities on the battlefield? So it's very much in proximity, and it is a iterative and a very quick paced, meant to be an agile process that we see as we transform the Army.
Mm-hmm. In what ways are you trying to transform the Army, and in what ways does that model help you to do that? Is it just in operations? Is it just in tactics? Is it in technology? All of the above? Something else?
I would have to say it's all the above. As the director of Army Capabilities Management for Electromagnetic Warfare, I'm charged with being able to bring those electromagnetic warfare capabilities to the Army. Mm-hmm. But in the forefront of my mind at all times is how do we operationalize these capabilities on the battlefield? How do our soldiers need to train? How do we, what are their policy concerns, if there are any? How do we update our doctrine to ensure that the generations to come are also able to effectively fight using the capabilities that we have on the battlefield?
Mm-hmm. What have been the inhibitors, if any, for you to be able to maximize the potential of electromagnetic warfare?
Well, you know what? That's a great question, Francis. So I have to say that the Army, electromagnetic warfare kind of took a back seat for about 10, 15 years. You saw a little bit of it during OIF and OEF, not nearly to the extent that we saw in probably prior wars, especially like, say, World War II in Vietnam. However, what we've seen, especially some of the lessons learned with Russia, starting way back in 2008, and what we saw with Russia, going against Crimea, Georgia, and then against the Ukraine in 2014, we'll be able to observe their use and their weaponization of the electromagnetic spectrum on the battlefield, and then in their current fight that we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine, we are certainly drawing off those lessons learned that help us inform how we need to approach the transformation in contact with our soldiers, with capabilities, training, and operations.
What do you see going on in these various theaters of operation now that other forces are involved in that you can draw from that and apply to what you want the Army to do?
I will tell you that the way that both Ukraine and Russia have really weaponized the electromagnetic spectrum, not only military communications, but commercial communications, how they are leveraging innovation in a very rapid pace to be able to get capability and target each other on the battlefield. And electromagnetic warfare has been it's been transformed. Oftentimes, in the past, we just thought it was going to be barrage jamming, right? But that impacts our own communications. And so you are seeing a very deliberate tactics that are on the battlefield today that we're observing as we are, from the United States standpoint.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the conversations that I've had here have wrapped EW in with cyber and with information operations. Do you see that from your perspective on the Army side too?
Absolutely. I feel like you can't canalize. You cannot canalize these capabilities separately. Mm-hmm. There's an integrated effort. It's funny, we just had a panel on ubiquitous sensing, and we were talking about these invisible effects, right? But they are impactful. And to your point, you will see where there may be a cyber-enabled EW effect, or there is certainly RF-enabled cyber effects. And then obviously in the age of information and where we are with social media and what that looks like in the battlefield, you then bring in that information advantage and how that is how information advantage is able to pull those levers between your cyber, your electromagnetic warfare, and other information operations on the battlefield.
Is that the explanation for the emphasis now on electromagnetic spectrum, the fact that you can do things now with it that you couldn't 10 or 15 years ago, as you alluded to earlier?
Absolutely, yes, sir. We are, it was, this past year, it was posited. How do we gain electromagnetic spectrum superiority on the battlefield? And much kind of like, I want to say that the analogy that was used was the old, own the night. Think back in the early 80s with night vision goggles. And then how do we bring that mindset, those capabilities, and how do we fight in that manner in the electromagnetic spectrum? So how do we own the EMS? And that certainly that brings in to bear electromagnetic warfare, but it also brings in electromagnetic spectrum operations. And there's a convergence of how we operationalize those two disciplines on the battlefield.
What is driving that convergence, and what's the benefit to the warfighter? What edge do you get over the enemy in that?
I would say that, we are operating in a time where we are in a congested communications environment. There is a proliferation of not only different types of communication on the battlefield, but there is a proliferation of sensors on the battlefield. And so how we're able to leverage the networks, the sensors and the capabilities, but then also potentially there's the counter side of that with the adversary, how they're also able to leverage those same aspects to be able to deliver effects and impact operations.
What is your vision, or what is the Army's vision for electromagnetic superiority? It's simple to say we want more or better or whatever than the opponent, but I imagine the reality of it is much more complex than that.
I would agree. And I will tell you, I think a lot of it, so I think the capabilities we're starting to see those capabilities roll out. You probably had a few conversations about next generation command and control. But there's also some spectrum awareness capabilities that we're rolling out. We're also, to help us see ourselves in the battlefield. There is some electromagnetic warfare planning capabilities as well. A capability that's been around for a bit, but it's going through a software modernization period right now. And it's called EWPMT, where we're able to really bring a data convergence between that S2AS capability and EWPMT to see ourselves, see our own signals in the battlefield, but then see the adversaries' signals of interest on the battlefield as well, to help us sense, understand, and decide what non-kinetic effect we want to deliver against that signal.
You can read more about transformation in contact on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com.